Welcome to this Poets at War special report, where our general was interviewed on a separate podcast, Civilian Cyber Intelligence. Make sure to check the link in the description for that podcast. And now, on with the show.
So, hello everyone. This is Civilian Cyber Intelligence. Today we're going to be discussing Poets at War Press with Joshua David Ling, Chief Bard at Poets at War Press. And let's start with a little bit of scripture reading from Mark 16:15. So, and he said to them, "Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation." So, Joshua, would you like to introduce yourself in any way, or we can go straight into discussing what is Poets at War?
Sure. I'm Joshua David Ling. I am an artist, a bard, a lay minister of the church. Chesterton reminds people that we definitely need pastors. I'm paraphrasing here. We definitely need pastors. I'm not saying we don't need pastors, but we may also need someone called a poet to remind, because the pastor reminds people that they are uh basically. Oh, I'm trying to remember how it goes. Because a pastor says that we may one day die. We will one day die. That's what a pastor's main job to do is to remind people that one day they will die. A poet's job is to remind people that they're not dead yet. And so that's a slightly different thing than pastor. That's why I'm not a pastor. And that's why I'm not at the moment interested in being a pastor. Not wouldn't discount that if that was God's calling, but it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
And basically that's my sort of thing that I've been doing for a long time personally. So yeah.
Um, so what sort of things inspired you to start Poets at War? Um, any life events or anything like that, or just feel called to?
There's a lot for Poets at War. Poets at War itself is the podcast that I've
Yeah.
been running for the past several years. It started after the second Fight Laugh Feast conference in Lebanon, Tennessee. I had been working on the idea, uh, the original idea. I was thinking about, excuse me, creating some kind of artistic news podcast with my friend Benjamin Curley.
Mhm.
And he generally liked the idea, but wasn't really sure about certain things. And he was very, very busy. So after hearing Doug TeNaples talk on Just Do It kind of a thing at the Lebanon conference, it's a fantastic talk. He rambles, he does the whole Doug TeNaple thing.
Yeah.
But it is really good if you can take the time to listen to it. He uh he really inspired me to just go out and start doing it and see what would happen. And I ended up interviewing a whole bunch of people, and it's kind of gone through several permutations, but that's sort of how Poets at War started. Now you were referring to that, not Poets at War Press, correct?
So the follow-up to that is, how does that lead into Poets at War Press?
Got it. Poets at War Press is something that Alexander Robertson and I are starting off the back of Poets at War. The main purpose of which is to specifically become a trusted brand for consumers like any other business, and be good curators of excellent art and media for our customers. However, the other half of that is we want to be excellent friends to artists, because artists are a kind of people who tend to be somewhat isolated, or they tend to be a little weird. They're hard to understand. And
That's weird.
Alex and I really, I know, right? Alex and I really want to bridge the gap between the consumers and the artists by being friends to the artists and being a proper upstanding, I guess you say, or whatever, group toward the consumers on the other end, and really being a middleman to help facilitate more patronage to artists from members of the church. And through that, that looks like being a confederated group. It's mainly me and Alex as the actual employees of this thing, but essentially becoming contracted with these different artists for various events and to be on the roster where we sell your things on the website to your specifications, right? As an
Okay.
artist. And so yeah, that's kind of the hope.
And to those wondering, Alex is another friend of ours. He wasn't able to make it. He was currently at FLF this year, and um, obviously that takes up way more time and a bigger priority than this. Um, so, we kind of touched on it, but what are some of the challenges that Christian artists face in today's world and um, in the climate with um, secular artists and big companies, not going to name any names, but trying to push um, them out of the world of being able to share their work?
Well, I don't necessarily look at a lot of the big companies. I mean, they have a bad attitude about business in general,
Mhm.
but I don't think
Yeah.
they specifically have a bad attitude toward artists like a lot of artists say. I think they
Okay.
are trying to give artists, generally speaking, as big a piece of the pie as they think they can conscionably do, while opening up the lowering the bar to where just about anybody can experiment with it, right? That also gives them a bigger field to harvest talent and to figure out, what works really well so they can push it and make more money. That's just basic business.
Yeah.
Where we end up having issue is as far as corporations go, is corporations are not interested in the meaning side of art at all. The artists are all about the meaning, and the corporations are not. And I would add, a lot of the artists aren't interested in the business side of things,
Yep.
and the corporate side is. So this is one of the reasons Poets of War Press is a big deal as far as what we're trying to do, because there's weird artisty people who are super idealist and maybe they just need a friend to talk to them about business, right?
Yep.
A real friend who can help translate the business aspect and the meaning aspect of the art into a cohesive whole. As far as other challenges, I think the biggest things for artists themselves is their own sin. A lot of people just really, everyone in the world struggles with things like lust. They struggle with their own ideas of self-importance and pride. A lot of those things are amplified for artists because they have an appreciation for beauty in a society that currently has been losing its appreciation of beauty for decades now.
Or skewing the definition of what beauty is.
Right, exactly. And so I mean, and beauty is objective. It is something that is observable. And that is something that God has baked into the fabric of reality and expresses in his word, the exact standard for beauty. And we sit there and we look at all these things that are, being pressed in one direction, and we become more and more alienated and more radicalized and isolated and all the rest. It's just a fact. And the only way that artists can really do better is in community. And unfortunately, the church in many places has no clue what to do with these wacky little weirdos. I mean, just look at the Jesus People movement. Look at the
Yep.
current movement with young men who are being radicalized in all sorts of directions. But yeah, you look even at J.R.R. Tolkien, who would have never actually published Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or even attempted these things had not C.S. Lewis pressed him as a friend, right? And so that's
Super cool
kind of the
story
main
if you
thing.
guys don't know anything about it.
And everyone goes, oh, we need community, we need this, we need that. We hear this from the liberal side all the time, and just because they're liberals we think they're wrong. Oh, they're not, you know.
Yeah.
And while I can work for in my specific church, um reform in regard to how to deal with artists, and I can also work in the church broader by being a voice through Poets at War to express the needs of artists in community. The fact is, I cannot specifically directly change the church's, issues, right? That is something that we need to talk about. We have to have conversations about, but I can create something like Poets at War Press and The Brood, which we can get into at another point. The Brood is more just a group of artist friends who meet together like the Inklings, but I digress. The point is, these guys need help from artists and not artists, people who just appreciate art and can speak that language to a certain extent in order to not only make beautiful, well, in order to make beautiful things and to be able to uh facilitate making more beautiful things, which involves business, generally speaking. So whether it's patronage or otherwise.
And to that point, what are your views on patronage versus a more traditional going? What are your views on patronage versus more traditional going out and selling stuff through bookstores and um, Amazon, etc.?
Generally speaking, I'm for always all avenues, whatever it is that the consumer chooses on the other end, I think really is the main thrust. And then secondarily, the artist willing to actually produce it. I think that capitalism is works in such a way that we can really kind of figure this stuff out without a problem. It's just a matter of throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, which a lot of people don't want to go through that. They want to, theorize up and down one side and the other. And I'm very agnostic on that. I think whatever works for the time and season and culture is the way things should work, within God's law, right?
Absolutely. Um, so let's do what do you where do you see the company in 5, 10 years? Let's start there.
At the 5 year mark, I'm hoping to have me traveling more than quarterly to do events around the nation, bringing physical books and physical product to the events and promoting the website amongst other things to people for the sake of selling artists product from product from the artists on our roster. Our roster is just beginning. We're in talks with a few different artists, trying to see who we can sign to a roster contract. That'll be more for the website. And then for events, we're going to work on individual contracts per event. And so I'm hoping that the main thing that I'm hoping for is me being on the road, us being active friends to artists in business instead of just art. The Brood has been very much active in helping artists with their art, but I want Poets at WordPress to help them with their business. And in helping them with their business, I mean everything from actually being an effective business to their mental health in producing said product, right?
Absolutely.
And their spiritual relationship with the Lord, because we're going to be signing Christian artists. Now, if we'd have a discussion with a non-Christian artist, but it would probably not be it just depends on the situation as far
Yeah.
as that goes. But we're looking for a very specific form of talent that is in the Lewis Tolkien vein, and that is what we are trying to facilitate creating more of in Christendom and to push the limits of format and artistic ability. That's what we're hoping for on an artistic end of things. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So the
did you want to do 10 years or no?
yeah, let's discuss 10 years. Do you guys see doing in-house printing or anything like that within that time frame? Or I know those are some
Within the
higher.
time frame could be a little hard, but we're seeing what we can do. It would have to be a an act of God money wise, because a
Yeah.
printing press is very expensive. But we really would love to have more in-house production. We can do some limited in-house production even now when it comes to CDs, and I produce audiobooks on SD card.
Okay.
In
Yep.
a fashionable way, in an attractive way, and yeah, we're hoping to make as much in-house over time as possible. When it comes to 10 years, what I'm hoping is that I'm on the road every month at the very least, and we're actually able to sustain that monetarily, keep working forward, and we're beginning work on getting me and Alex in the same city and working on creating an actual building to where we could house a printing press and the like, as well as potentially hold events, and possibly some other sorts of options as far as the building itself. I think that's in 10 years, we really want a place to be doing what we're doing.
What are some, again, I touched on this a little bit. Um, what are some of the particular challenges that Christian artists encounter that um, you plan on resolving through the company, such as distributing visibility and funding?
Yeah, that is going to come depending on the contracts that we sign with them. I want to advise them as far as where to take their own business, because they will still be completely independent. They will still own all their rights.
Mhm.
And so we're in that case, we do sell directly through us, but you still going to be able to buy through their website and whatever else they're doing too. And so I really want to have the discussion with the artist on what they want and see how that is performing and advise them according to what we have found has worked when we find what works. We're continuing to find what works with me as the flagship artist. And so we're making notes based on what works with me, because I have a very, very different way of doing things. And so I'm hoping that I am universal enough to where, in what I do, even though it's weird and different and whatever else, I have my fingers in a little bit of everything. So I'm hoping that the experience of trying to promote me and my stories will help aid in figuring out what will advise our other artists. Some of the artists, for example, I'm very pro AI when it comes to art, not necessarily in regard to every single image, nor everyone even
No.
necessarily being good at making AI art,
Hmm. Yep.
prompting it and editing it and all the rest. But I am very pro in using those tools toward removing the drudgery for the artist and being able to focus on the meaning and the point of the story, or whatever it is they're creating, the beauty of the object itself, whatever it is. And so in that, there are some people that are going to be coming onto our roster who are not going to be pro AI at all. They will, in fact, be anti AI more than likely. And so, in that regard, I don't want them to violate their conscience, to do things that they don't want to do, to change their production line, right? I want them to do what they are comfortable with and moving forward to build their business the way they want to build it. And just be an advisor and a helper as best as we can and see where things go from there. Yeah, we'll have tough discussions. I'll say, "Oh, you really need it for this," but I'm not going to push them, out of the company or out of the fellowship. It's based on what they're doing, and each one has their own specific challenges. But generally speaking, I think many of them need help uh being everywhere at once. And that's the number one thing: being in person, being online, having shorts on TikTok, having, all the being everywhere and being known. That is the main thing that they have issue with. And like I said, I have a very scattershot approach. We find what works and we double down on it. And that is the way I want to move forward in finding what works for individual artists.
Absolutely. Um, so um, you mentioned TikToks, YouTube Shorts, etc. What are some technologies that you guys are planning on implementing to further the marketing of these artists?
In regard to software, hardware, skills, anything like.
Software and hardware. We'll touch on skills in just a second.
Okay. When it comes to software, obviously I would like I have my tools that I can use in my regard, but the main thing is I want to find out what they have hardware and software wise and provide them potentially with some of the software or things that I have connection with and to, depending on the situation. For my art, I use a lot of I use Playground AI, although they are changing a lot when it comes to their system. So I'm probably going to be moving to Leonardo AI in the near future for images and some motion related stuff. I also use Suno. There's a few that I'm really hoping to be using in the future. Automy is one. They do better vocals, and there's ways to integrate those into a Suno song. Um, and then there are other ones. I use Final Cut still. I think Final Cut is a great editor. I have my Shure SM7B microphone that I do my audiobook readings with. I use OBS a lot, even beyond what most people think of OBS for streaming. Right now, actually, I'm using OBS because my microphone goes into my Mac, into OBS, and then comes back out through a virtual audio cable to what you're hearing now. So there is active sound cancellation going on through OBS, right? Um, all these other sorts of tools and things, they can work into a workflow for specific people, specific artists. And some people don't know that those cogs can even fit into their machine. So really, I just want to look at their what they want to do wholesale and suggest efficiency changes to help them not deal with as much drudgery, especially in the areas of posting and like I said, recording. Offering recording services, for their audiobooks and stuff with a maybe more generous toward Poets at WordPress split, that sort of a thing, depending on the situation. So, like I said, a lot of it comes down to what do the artists need. I want to approach that holistically. I want to approach it like a really good doctor would, who's actually trying to find out what's wrong with this individual instead of just here, slap the template answer on.
Absolutely. Um, so going from there into skill sets, what are some of the skill sets that Poets at WordPress will be offering and also be accepting? So,
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah, we would love to have some folks on the roster, even who aren't actively producing their own work, if they do have skill set that they want to share with the artists, and that could be something where they could be worked into splits, royalty splits, that sort of a thing. Editing is one, particularly in the area of text right now, but we're definitely interested in video, audio editors in the future. We also have a need for um, different kinds of artists of visual stripe, as well as singers and musicians. All of these things are still important even when I'm talking about AI. Don't get me wrong on that. I think that we all need to be using those as humans to make our art even better, and figure out how to use those tools to enhance our art, not to take away from it or to replace it in any sort of way, shape, or form. This is what happened with the Pixar when they first started, right? They were using tools that were different from the traditional animators and finding different ways to do things on a different way. And both are valuable. We need people who are doing it straight from their soul right onto a piece of paper. We need that.
definitely.
And we need people who are doing it on the cheapest, quickest sort of budget that they possibly can to put out something regularly so that we're getting something out regularly. I'm talking a very big spectrum of skills and types of talent. And whatever God brings, we want to integrate it. I'll put it that way. And I want to offer that to everybody, and for us to really truly work together as a fellowship of people who are trying to raise the whole ship, in the storm. So,
How would you say your faith has shaped and is shaping the company currently?
a lot of people have answers like this that, immediately they go, oh, it's the bedrock of everything kind of thing. But that's kind of how I have to answer, specifically in regard to, though, I want to be at the very core of everything that I'm doing a father reading to the children who didn't get read to. That
Okay.
includes fathers and mothers who are currently married, who are desperately trying to find good stuff for their kids, and other sorts of people who just need that bit of encouragement that I received from my father reading me the Chronicles of Narnia growing up. He regularly read the Chronicles of Narnia to us over and over and over. I probably heard each of them 3 or 4 times over the course of my childhood, where we would read a chapter a night. And that eventually led to Lord of the Rings movies in 2001 and on into the books. And that led to The Song of Albion by Stephen Lawhead, which is an incredible series. And that led to the Wingfeather Saga by Andrew Peterson. And those 4 sets of books are in a very special place on that wardrobe right there.
Yep.
That outside of the scriptures themselves, they are the most important books in the world to me. When we recently had to flee for Hurricane Helene, I took those and my great grandmother's Bible with me, because I did not want anything to happen to those books. And yeah, it's a lot of books to take, but it was needed. And the main point with each of those was they confirmed what the Bible was saying was beautiful and good. I always knew it was true, and you have to presuppose that it is true. That is where faith really kicks in, right? But
Yep.
knowing that the Bible is good and beautiful is hardly ever talked about in church these days.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah.
Definitely. That is honestly an understatement. Um, what precautions or plans do you have to put in place to stay grounded in biblical values while navigating the struggles and competitive nature of the creative industry?
One of the main things is when Alex and I have meetings, we do try to pray together. We do plan on praying with roster folks when we talk to them as much as we can. But a big part is just staying an actual part of their lives. And the brood has been a really big part of that. You're a part of it now. You've seen it. You deal with the crazy and the chaos that is the brood. And we're constantly asking about prayer, encouragement, but also alongside, we laugh together. There's a lot of prayer groups that have no humor. They have no sharing of memes, no, whatever, and everything is all somber and everything else. And I think a lot of churches kind of end up that way. That we take everything so seriously that we forget we have a hilarious God that created giraffes, right? Like, good
Yep.
gracious, giraffes are weird. And so it's one of these things where if we can laugh together and pray together and laugh and weep together. This is Ecclesiastes, right? A time to laugh, a time to cry, right?
Yep.
And if those things can happen, I really do think that we can stay grounded in the world, in the word, excuse me. I think it's really funny. um we have such a broad spectrum, actually, like on paper. We have Catholics, we have an Eastern Orthodox guy, we have Reformed Presbyterians, we have a couple Baptists. And the thing is, all of us really and truly are joined because of 3 men: C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and G.K. Chesterton. And I think they've done more in the 20th century than any 3 men to unite a lot of the disparate denominations. But in that regard, we have a shorthand for how to talk to one another, I can say to somebody, what you're dealing with right now, remember Puddleglum, remember Frodo, right? I can say, remember Peter. I can say, remember uh Jill Pole, or Aslan is on the move, all these
Yep.
different sorts of things. We have this shorthand with each other that allows us to encourage one another in ways that are biblical. They're grounded in the word of God, and we know that we are characters in his story. And so, regardless of whether I'm speaking to a Catholic, as a Reformed Presbyterian, I can actually, in some interesting ways, advise them in the form beyond the forms, right? Um, and that has been so valuable. And that shorthand really is one of the great blessings of our forefathers that we're going to be standing on to help with keeping us grounded in the word.
And in my opinion, I think we'll be standing on it for generations to come.
Agreed.
I don't think it'll end at even my kids' generation. Um, I hope not, at least.
Well, even
Um,
in things that aren't Christian, one of the ones that comes to mind is Firefly by Joss Whedon, the
hmm,
TV show. In the movie Serenity, can't stop the signal, Mal.
yep.
Right? I just gave you a shorthand in fiction for what you just said, and that was from a atheist who was also inspired by people like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. So
Nope.
it's like it's not only in the bones of the Christians, it's in the bones of the entire Western culture, and it has, even though they've tried to eradicate it in some ways, they're having a really hard time getting it out for some reason. And I honestly think our culture would be far worse right now than it is if not for the Peter Jackson films coming out in the early 2000s.
Yep.
I think we'd be far further down the line, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So how do you, or sorry, um, how would you plan on, or how would you currently advise a struggling or new artist who wants to create, but doesn't have an audience or is struggling to gain an audience?
Read Plot Activity by Doug Wilson.
Okay.
That's really the biggest thing. If you read Plot Activity, you will have a lot of the tools, but the long and short of it is do the little tiny bits you can every day. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That has been my entire life. There are stories that I still have not completed that I started at 13 years old that I've done little bits at a time. And that's not to say that, there haven't been times where I couldn't do little bits at a time. Those legitimately happened and will continue to happen often. Uh, we were talking, how do you stay grounded? I mentioned Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. I mentioned the Joss Whedon thing.
Yep.
Let me just start on atheist. And that's from an atheist that absolutely doesn't appreciate Christian culture or anything of that nature. In fact, he rejected it from his father. That's a whole different story. But he this is in the bones of not just Christians but non-Christians as well. And so you're
Yeah.
right. They've been having a really hard time pushing it off, and I just think we'll have to see where things go from there.
Yeah. Definitely.
So yeah, in the end, I really think that the main thing is just being consistent where you can be consistent and stepping up to
Mhm.
the plate and hitting the ball. It doesn't matter if you're out, more times than you hit, because quite frankly, in baseball, you hit 300, you're good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the people who hit 300 are the ones who succeed as artists,
Yep. Definitely. Um, so what what particular plans do you have for the next year for Poets at War Press?
Um, for this year, not a whole lot, because the year's coming to an end. But in 12 months, we're hoping to
Mhm.
have done probably 2 or 3 shows at that point. And when I say shows, I mean conferences or
Mhm.
expos, that sort of a thing. and start to get somewhat of an audience through that, get people signed up to an email list, work on that sort of a thing, sell some product. In that regard, we're trying to currently, we haven't started yet, but we're going to be beginning a fund at poetsatwar.com for a van for us so that I can get places, as well as sort of just a general road fund, so that we can get to these shows and get booths and do what we need to do. So that's kind of where we're mainly focused at the moment on Poets at War Press itself. On the talent acquisition side, like I said, we're in talks with several people, trying to figure out what they would want in a contract, because these will be the first ones, right? And so we kind of want to templatize based on them, but make it so that it's completely negotiable for anyone that we talk to at the same time. So that's kind of where we're at the moment, and what we hope to accomplish. We're hoping to do 2 to 3 shows in the next year. May not hit that, but I think we can do at least 1. So we're going to see what happens and try to build out from there. Have our website going, have product on it, and have that, like I said, that general road fund going, because that's really where things are going to tick up, is when we can start getting people to throw in a couple bucks here and there and make sure that we have what we need to get to these shows, to have a booth, and to do our job. So yeah.
Okay, so do you have any final words on the importance of sharing one's creative gifts to glorify the Lord and spread the kingdom of God?
If you're not doing it and you're suffering, you're an artist. And that suffering
100%.
is God telling you, do it. So in that regard, you might say, well, I can't do it. There's so much going on, this, that, and that might be the case. That might be why God's telling you to do it. Because ultimately, that stuff isn't more important exclusively from the things you need to be doing, right? But it is more important in that God intends for you to do that in eternity, right? In some capacity.
Yeah.
And so my main bit of advice is for artists, even over consumers and that sort of a thing, people who are interested in art, artists, you need to be sharpening your sword. You need to be doing your katas, so to speak. You need to be continually creating so that when the time comes for you to step up to the plate, you hit a home run. If you're not doing that and not being faithful in the seasons where there is nothing, you're not going to be a great artist ever, right? And even if you fail, if you are being faithful to what God has put in your heart, and yes, I go that far, what God has put in your heart as a sanctified Christian, you're failing him. You're failing your sovereign. And he will bless it in that he will cover your sins.
Yep.
But he saved you. This is the least you can do to draw pictures for him.
Okay. So in summary, this is Joshua David Ling, chief poet and owner and CEO of Poets at War Press. And where can people go to find you?
Right now, where most of our stuff is joshuadavidling.com. That is where Poets at War resides at the moment, but we are beginning to build poetsatwar.com. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Okay. Any social media or anything like that?
I'm mostly at Joshua David Ling almost everywhere, but you can find me. Just look up Joshua David Ling. You'll find me on any platforms. I'm on YouTube. Everything from YouTube to Gab, just everywhere.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm easy
absolutely.
to find.